Hey everyone. We are so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers. Please smash that subscribe button and help our unveiled family reach our goal. Thanks to everyone who has already subscribed. We love you. Now to the video. I didn't think a normal Tuesday could flip my whole work-life upside down, but that was the week it happened. The kind of week where your stomach drops for no clear reason and you keep checking your phone even though nothing new is there. I had been riding a quiet high for months, doing well at work, finally feeling like I wasn't invisible in that office maze of gray carpet and half-dead plants. Then one small choice, one awkward date, turned into something that felt way bigger and way darker than it had any right to be. The office had always felt weirdly calm in the mornings. The building was old but tried hard to feel modern, all glass doors and exposed pipes, like it was cosplaying as a startup even though it had been around forever. I would get there early, grab burnt coffee from the break room, and scroll Slack while pretending I wasn't tired. People acted friendly but distant, like everyone was quietly competing while smiling at the same time. I had learned how to blend into that vibe. She worked 2 rows over from me. Not my team, not my manager, just close enough that we crossed paths a lot. It started harmless. Reactions on Slack threads, casual jokes about projects, sending memes that had nothing to do with work but didn't feel wrong either. I didn't chase it. It just sort of slid into my day like background noise. When she asked if I wanted to get drinks after work, I didn't think much of it. One date. No big deal. The date itself was fine. Not amazing, not terrible. Just 2 people talking too much because silence felt worse. I knew halfway through that it wasn't going anywhere. There was this off feeling like we were both trying to perform versions of ourselves that didn't quite line up. When it ended, I made sure to be polite. I said I had fun. I said work was about to get busy. I didn't ghost. I didn't insult her. I just didn't push for another one. The next week felt normal at first. Same commute, same emails, same meetings that could have been emails. I noticed she was quieter on Slack, but I didn't read into it. People have off weeks. I focused on my own stuff, especially since my manager had hinted that my name was being floated for a promotion. Nothing official, just enough to keep me motivated. Then the calendar invite hit. HR no subject line that made sense. Just my name in a half-hour block. My chest tightened in that instant way like my body knew before my brain caught up. I had never been called into HR before. I tried to convince myself it was routine, some policy update, some paperwork thing. Still, my hands were shaky all morning. The HR office was on a different floor, quieter, colder somehow. No music. No casual chatter. I sat there staring at a poster about workplace values while my thoughts spiraled. When the meeting ended, I walked out feeling like the floor had shifted under me. She had filed a complaint. About me. About messages. They didn't say harassment exactly, but they did not say it either. They showed me screenshots of Slack messages I recognized instantly. Jokes pulled out of threads. Sentences cropped so the context vanished. Reactions turned into intentions. Stuff that had felt mutual and normal now looked bad when frozen in time and stripped of everything around it. My name at the top. Timestamps. Annotations. What messed me up wasn't just the complaint. It was how calm everything felt. Like this was just another process for them. I was told the promotion was on hold until things were reviewed. Not canceled, just paused. That word sat heavy in my head. On hold. Like my future was music waiting to resume, but someone else had their finger on the button. I went back to my desk and tried to act normal. I answered messages. I joined meetings. I nodded at jokes. Inside, my thoughts were racing in loops. Every Slack message I had ever sent suddenly felt dangerous. I scrolled through my history, read things I had forgotten about, overthinking every emoji, every casual line. It felt like my own words had turned against me. She avoided eye contact after that. Not in a dramatic way. Just enough to notice. I didn't confront her. I didn't message her. I barely even moved when she walked past. The office air felt thicker, like everyone knew something was wrong even if they didn't know what. I started eating lunch alone, headphones in, staring at nothing. Days turned into weeks. HR sent follow-up emails that said a lot without saying anything at all. Still under review. Still pending. Still on hold. My manager stopped bringing up growth or future plans. Conversations shifted to short-term tasks. I could feel myself shrinking in that space like I was trying not to take up too much room. What really got to me was the paranoia. Every notification made my heart jump. Every meeting invite felt like a trap. I started drafting messages in my head and deleting them before typing a word. I was scared of myself, of how anything could be twisted later. The office that once felt boring now felt hostile in a quiet way. One afternoon, I noticed a shared folder on Slack that I had never paid attention to before. It was just called screenshots. Not hidden. Not locked. I don't know why I clicked it. Maybe curiosity, maybe self-punishment. It was full of random stuff people saved for reference. Error messages. Design notes. And then, buried a few scrolls down, images of my own messages. Cropped versions. The same ones HR had shown me. I didn't know if that was allowed or not. I didn't know who had access. All I knew was that pieces of my normal workday had been collected and stored like evidence. It felt invasive in a way I couldn't explain. Like someone had been watching me closer than I ever realized. I started sleeping less. My dreams were boring but stressful, just endless scrolling, endless meetings, endless waiting. I would wake up already tired. My friends outside work noticed I was off, but I couldn't explain it without sounding dramatic. How do you explain that your whole career feels like it's hanging on screenshots? Eventually, HR closed the review. No punishment. No apology either. Just a note that expectations had been clarified and the matter was resolved. My promotion was not mentioned again. It didn't come back up. The momentum was gone, like it had quietly died while no one was looking. She transferred teams a month later. No announcement. Just gone from my daily view. The office went back to its normal rhythm, but I never did. I still work there. I still open Slack every day. But now I type slower. I reread everything. I don't react to jokes. I don't blur lines. The building feels colder than it used to, and I can't tell if that's real or just me. Nothing dramatic happened in the end. No big confrontation. No satisfying wrap-up. Just a quiet shift in how safe the place felt. All from one date I tried to end kindly, and a handful of messages that stopped being mine the moment someone else decided what they meant.
I still remember the exact second my stomach dropped, like my body realized the truth before my brain wanted to. It was one of those moments that doesn't look scary from the outside. No alarms, no yelling, no dramatic pause. Just a regular workday that quietly turned into something I still think about when my phone buzzes too late at night. This wasn't some wild office rumor story. This was my live for a few months, and it messed with my head way more than I ever expected. I worked in a newer building on the edge of the city, the kind with long hallways and glass rooms that made you feel like you were always being watched. My department was on the 3rd floor, mostly project stuff, timelines, spreadsheets, boring but stable. His department was 2 floors up, something technical that everyone pretended to understand. We didn't cross paths much at first. Different schedules, different teams, different lunch spots. We matched through mutual coworkers before we ever talked at work. It started online, then slowly drifted into coffee breaks and elevators that lasted a little longer than they needed to. It felt low risk because we weren't on the same team. No shared boss. No shared deadlines. It felt safe in that fake office way, like rules only mattered if someone said them out loud. Dating him felt easy. Maybe too easy. He knew all the right complaints about work, all the right jokes about company culture, all the right ways to sound supportive without sounding intense. We kept it quiet at first. No public stuff. No Slack reactions. Just grabbing food after work, sitting in his car in the parking garage talking about nothing important. I told myself it was mature and chill. Looking back, it was mostly just convenient. Things started feeling off in small ways I ignored. He avoided certain areas of the building. He never stayed late if other people were around. He was weird about social events. Always had a reason he couldn't go, or had say he might stop by and then never did. I didn't think too hard about it. Work dating makes people cautious. That's what I told myself. The company retreat got announced on a Monday morning. 2 nights, some resort a few hours away, mandatory team bonding disguised as fun. People groaned but secretly got excited. Free food, open bar, no real work. My team was already planning outfits and room shares. I didn't think much about him in the retreat because he acted like it wasn't a big deal. The day of the team meeting started normal. It was one of those all-hands calls where half the people don't need to be there but show up anyway. Cameras on, fake smiles, someone always talking too long. I logged in from a small conference room with 2 coworkers, my laptop balanced on the table, notes open that I wasn't really paying attention to. About halfway through, a new square popped onto the screen. Another employee joining late. I didn't think anything of it at first. People jump in all the time. Then I noticed his posture change. It was subtle but sharp, like he had suddenly remembered something important and bad at the same time. His face went stiff. His eyes stopped moving. The woman who joined wasn't from my department. I recognized her from around the office, but only vaguely. She worked somewhere closer to his area. She looked calm, almost bored, like this was just another meeting for her. She didn't look confused. She didn't look surprised. She looked prepared. The meeting kept going. Slides changed. Someone joked about icebreakers at the retreat. And then it happened. She unmuted herself and asked which one of us he was bringing to the retreat. No raised voice. No emotion. Just a simple question dropped into a room full of people who suddenly had no idea where to look. Nobody laughed. Nobody spoke. The silence wasn't dramatic, it was awkward and thick and wrong. I felt heat rush up my neck and into my face. My hands went numb. My brain tried to make sense of it in pieces. Which one of us? Retreat. Us. That word hit harder than anything else. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. I stared at my screen like maybe if I focused hard enough, this would glitch out and rewind. My coworkers shifted in their chairs. Someone coughed. The meeting host tried to redirect, but it was too late. The damage was already done. She didn't say my name, but she didn't need to. Everyone could do basic math. They knew we were dating, or at least suspected. They knew she worked with him. They knew what that question meant. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't confusion. It was a reveal. The meeting ended early after that. No official reason. Just a rushed wrap-up and everyone logging off too fast. My coworkers avoided eye contact as we packed up. One of them pretended to get a phone call. The other suddenly remembered a task upstairs. I was left alone in the room with my thoughts racing and my chest feeling too tight. He didn't text me right away. That silence was worse than anything he could have said. I sat at my desk pretending to work, opening files and closing them, rereading emails I had already read. Every few minutes, someone would glance at me then look away. I felt like I was glowing in the worst way. When he finally messaged me, it wasn't an explanation. It was short and panicked and made everything worse. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize in any real way. He just tried to smooth it over like this was a scheduling issue instead of my entire sense of reality cracking. I found out through office whispers before I got any real clarity. She wasn't just a girlfriend. She had been with him for years. They had gone to previous retreats together. People knew them as a pair. Not loudly, not officially, but enough. Enough that I should have known if I had been paying attention. HR didn't call me in right away. The office doesn't move fast unless it has to. But the social part moved instantly. People chose sides without saying it out loud. Some avoided me like I was contagious. Others were overly nice in that pity way that feels worse than silence. The retreat still happened. I didn't go. I said I was sick, which wasn't even a lie. I couldn't imagine being trapped in a resort with people who had watched that moment unfold. I couldn't imagine seeing him there, pretending everything was fine. I stayed home, scrolling through photos people posted later, feeling like I was watching a different version of my own job. He transferred departments not long after. Not because of me, officially, but because it was easier. She stayed. I stayed. The building didn't change, but the way it felt did. Hallways got longer. Elevators felt smaller. Every meeting felt like a reminder of how quickly things can turn without warning. Nothing dramatic happened after that. No big apology tour. No public fallout. Just quiet consequences. Awkwardness. Whispers. A reputation I didn't ask for. I kept my head down and did my work. I stopped trusting easy connections. I stopped assuming I knew the full story. The worst part wasn't being embarrassed. It was realizing how much of my life had overlapped with someone else's without me knowing. How normal everything felt right up until it didn't. How one calm question in a meeting changed how I saw the entire office.
I used to think the worst part of work was being bored, but I learned there are way worse things than boredom. The kind of thing that starts small and quiet, something you don't even register as dangerous until you're already stuck inside it. This is one of those stories where nothing illegal happens on paper, nothing loud or explosive, but it still wrecks your sense of safety in a place you have to show up to every day. I didn't tell anyone for a long time because I wasn't even sure how to explain it without sounding dramatic. Now I know it wasn't dramatic at all. It was calculated. I worked at a mid-sized company in an office park that looked like it had been copied and pasted a dozen times across the city. Beige buildings, reflective windows, parking lots that smelled like hot asphalt. My team sat in a long row of desks with low walls that didn't block sound or attention. She was my manager. Not high up, but high enough. She controlled assignments, deadlines, reviews, and how my name showed up in meetings when I wasn't there. She noticed me before I noticed her. Extra check-ins, quick comments about my work, asking how I was doing in a way that felt more personal than necessary. At first it felt flattering. She made me feel seen in a place where most people barely looked up from their screens. It didn't feel risky right away. It felt like a secret boost. It stayed quiet. No public stuff. No messages on official channels. Everything stayed just outside of work systems. I told myself that made it safer. Smarter. I knew the rules on paper. I also knew how often those rules got bent without consequences. That logic felt solid at the time. For a while, nothing changed at work. My tasks stayed reasonable. Feedback stayed positive. She even gave me flexibility on a few deadlines, framed as trust in my abilities. I was doing well and it felt like momentum. I didn't see the imbalance clearly then. I didn't want to. The shift started when I got tired. Not of the job, but of the situation. Keeping things hidden takes energy. Always thinking about who might see what, who might connect dots. I started wanting space. Normal space. I didn't want my manager knowing every detail of my live outside work. I didn't want every late night task to feel loaded. When I tried to end it, I was careful. Calm. Respectful. I didn't accuse her of anything. I didn't threaten. I just said I needed to focus on work and wanted to keep things professional. I thought that was the safest way. I thought being mature would protect me. The change at work was almost immediate, but subtle enough that I second-guessed myself. The next week, I was assigned to a project that should have taken 3 people. No adjusted timeline. No extra support. Just a note about it being a growth opportunity. I stayed late. I skipped breaks. I tried to make it work. Then another project landed. Overlapping deadlines. Vague requirements. When I asked clarifying questions, I got answers that didn't line up or arrived too late to matter. Suddenly my calendar was full of check-ins that felt less like support and more like surveillance. Everything I did was being watched. She started documenting things. Not big failures, just tiny moments reframed as concerns. A missed detail here. A delay there. Things that had never been issues before were now patterns. I didn't know this at first. I only felt the pressure. The tightening space. My teammates noticed something was off. They joked about my workload being cursed. They asked why I was suddenly on every high-pressure task. I laughed it off. I didn't tell them the truth. I didn't think it would help, and I wasn't sure anyone would believe me. One afternoon, she scheduled a one-on-one with a vague agenda. I walked in expecting another project talk. Instead, I walked out feeling like my job was suddenly unstable. She mentioned concerns about consistency. about focus, about attitude. Words that are hard to argue with because they mean everything and nothing at the same time. After that, the paper trail started showing up in places I could see. Follow-up emails summarizing conversations that had felt casual in the moment but now read like warnings. Phrases about expectations and accountability. I read them over and over, trying to remember if the meetings had really felt that serious. They hadn't. Not then. The worst part was realizing how prepared she was. None of this felt reactive. It felt like a switch had flipped. Like she had gone from one mode to another without missing a step. The impossible projects kept coming. When I struggled, it confirmed the story being built. I tried to push back gently. I asked for clearer priorities. I asked for resources. I asked for timelines that made sense. Every request was logged as resistance. Every explanation was framed as an excuse. I started doubting my own memory. Maybe I really was slipping. Maybe I wasn't as good as I thought. HR got involved under the label of support. A meeting about alignment. About helping me succeed. I walked into that room already exhausted, already defensive. She came prepared with notes, dates, examples, things I barely remembered or remembered differently. But her version was cleaner, more confident. Sitting there, I realized how dangerous imbalance can be when someone decides to use it. She didn't need to lie outright. She just needed to choose which truths to highlight. She controlled the narrative because she controlled the records. I was placed on an improvement plan. The phrase alone made my stomach drop. Suddenly my days were about metrics and checkpoints instead of actual work. Everything I did was measured. Every small slip felt catastrophic. I stopped sleeping well. I stopped feeling like myself. Outside of work, my life shrank. I stopped making plans. I stopped talking about my job. It felt like carrying something heavy that I couldn't put down. I kept wondering if this was how it ended. Quietly. Officially. With a file full of notes that made me look incompetent. She stayed professional in public. Supportive even. Anyone looking in would think she was being fair. Generous. I felt trapped by how reasonable it all looked from the outside. That's what made it disturbing. Not anger or revenge, but control wrapped in process. Eventually, I found another role in a different company. I left without drama. No exit interview truth bombs. No closure. Just a resignation letter and a few awkward goodbyes. She wished me well. I nodded and walked out. I still think about how close I came to losing everything because I trusted the wrong person with the wrong kind of power. The office park looks the same when I drive past it. Beige and quiet. Like nothing bad ever happened there.
I used to think layoffs were loud, like alarms and tears in boxes. Turns out they can be quiet and slow, like a smell you don't notice until it's everywhere. This all started way before the meeting where my badge stopped working. It started with one mistake that didn't feel like a mistake at the time. Just one night, one coworker, one decision I didn't think would matter months later. I was wrong in a way that still makes my head feel tight when I think about it. I worked in a warehouse-style office near the river, open ceiling, concrete floors, long tables instead of cubicles. It was supposed to feel creative and chill. People wore hoodies and sneakers and acted like rules were optional as long as you hit deadlines. The kind of place where everyone said we were a family but still watched their backs. I liked it there. I felt normal there. He sat near the windows, always leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. Not my team, but close enough that we shared meetings and jokes. He was funny in a lazy way, always complaining about work but never actually doing bad at it. We talked during breaks, walked out together sometimes, nothing deep. It didn't feel dangerous. The one time it happened didn't feel dramatic. No build-up, no big emotions. Just a late night, too much comfort, bad boundaries. After that, I made it clear I wasn't interested in turning it into something. Not cold, not rude, just honest. He said he was fine with that. He acted like it didn't matter. For a while, it really didn't. Months passed. Projects changed. New hires came in. I barely thought about him. I focused on my tasks, my schedule, my live outside work. I assumed we were adults who moved on. I didn't realize he was telling a different story the whole time. The first weird sign was how people started treating me. Nothing obvious. Just small shifts. Coworkers asking if I was okay in a way that felt loaded. Managers checking in more often, but not about work. About stress. About balance. I brushed it off. The company was going through changes. Rumors about layoffs were everywhere. Everyone was on edge. Then I started hearing my name in rooms I wasn't in. Not directly, but through tone. Meetings would pause when I joined. Conversations would stop. I caught fragments that didn't make sense. Emotionally something. Personal stuff. I thought maybe I was imagining it because of the pressure. I didn't want to assume the worst. The layoff talks got serious fast. Leadership started having closed-door meetings. Calendars filled with vague invites. People whispered in the kitchen. Someone cried in the bathroom. It felt like the air was buzzing all the time. I kept my head down and did my work, thinking that was enough. It wasn't. The day before the layoffs were announced, my manager asked me to come in early. No agenda. Just a meeting. I didn't panic yet. I told myself this was normal. I walked in with my laptop and my notes, ready to talk about my projects. The meeting didn't go the way I expected. Instead of numbers or timelines, it was about concerns. About stability. About how I was perceived. Words like emotionally unstable floated around like facts. I froze. That wasn't me. That had never been feedback before. I asked for examples. I got vague answers. Things about reactions, tone, personal situations bleeding into work. Then it got worse. I was told there were concerns about my personal situation affecting my reliability. When I pushed, when I tried to understand what they were talking about, I found out what had been said about me. He had told leadership that I couldn't handle rejection. That I was spiraling. That I was unpredictable. That I was pregnant with his child and hiding it. That last part felt unreal. Like my brain refused to process it. I wasn't pregnant. I had never been. There was no basis for that at all. It was a lie built on nothing, but it had been said with enough confidence that people believed it or at least didn't question it. I realized then how long this had been going on. How many quiet conversations had happened without me. How many notes had been taken. How many impressions had formed. He wasn't just gossiping to coworkers. He was framing a narrative to people with power. I left that meeting feeling like I had stepped into the wrong version of my own life. Like there was a file with my name on it that described someone I didn't recognize. I sat at my desk afterwards staring at my screen, barely breathing, wondering how something so personal had turned into a professional judgment. The next day, the layoffs were announced. A company-wide call. Names weren't said out loud, but emails followed quickly. Mine came within minutes. My role was being eliminated. No mention of performance. No mention of rumors. Just business language and polite thanks. I tried to fight it. I emailed HR. I asked for clarification. I asked how false personal claims could factor into a decision like this. The responses were slow and careful. They said decisions were made based on multiple factors. They said they couldn't discuss internal conversations. They said they wished me the best. He stayed. After I was locked out of systems, after my badge stopped working, I heard more details from people I trusted. How he had positioned himself as concerned. How he had painted me as fragile. How the pregnancy rumor had spread quietly, not as gossip but as justification. Like leadership was doing me a favor by letting me go. I packed my desk in the afternoon when most people were in meetings. I didn't want an audience. I put my stuff in a box that was too small and carried it out past the river, past the building that still looked calm and modern and harmless. The worst part wasn't losing the job. It was knowing my name meant something else there now. That even after I left, the story would stay. That people would remember me as unstable, dramatic, complicated. All because one person couldn't accept a no. I didn't get closure. There was no apology. No correction. Just silence and distance. I started over somewhere else months later, with a new badge and new walls and new rules. But I still think about how fast things flipped. How something private turned into a weapon. How easy it was for a lie to sound official once it reached the right ears.
I used to think HR was invisible, like a background app running quietly while everyone else did the real stuff. That belief died on a Thursday morning when my calendar updated itself without asking me. No warning. No explanation that made sense. Just a meeting added by someone I had gone on one date with, and a subject line that made my stomach feel hollow. That was the moment I realized how much power can sit behind a friendly smile and a clipboard. I worked at a healthcare tech company on the outskirts of town, tucked between a strip mall and a storage facility. The office tried to feel warm with soft lighting and plants that were always half alive. My team worked long hours but kept things loose. People joked too much, overshared a little, said awkward things and moved on. It felt human. Messy but safe. She worked in HR but not the scary kind people talk about online. She handled onboarding, trainings, benefits questions. The helpful side. The side that sends welcome emails with smiley faces and reminders about wellness programs. We crossed paths when I needed help fixing a payroll issue. She was friendly and normal and didn't talk like a policy manual. The date came out of nowhere. Coffee after work turned into a walk, then dinner. It wasn't intense. It wasn't deep. Just two people talking about jobs and traffic and how weird offices are. I didn't feel a spark, but I didn't feel danger either. When it ended, we hugged and went our separate ways. I didn't follow up. She didn't either. I assumed that was that. 2 weeks later, the meeting showed up. It was labeled as a routine review, something about compliance. That word always felt vague to me, like a bucket big enough to hold anything. I wasn't worried at first. I had never been in trouble. I did my work. I didn't cause issues. I was just kind of awkward sometimes, like everyone else. The meeting room was smaller than I expected. No windows. Just a table, 2 chairs, and a monitor on the wall. She was already there when I walked in, sitting straight, hands folded, expression neutral in a way I had never seen before. It was like the version of her I knew had been replaced with someone else who happened to look the same. She started going through a checklist. Policies. Expectations. Company values. It felt rehearsed. Then she pulled up notes. Specific ones. Dates. Contexts. Things I had said months ago that I barely remembered. Comments made in meetings. Jokes in the break room. Offhand remarks that had landed wrong but never been addressed at the time. Suddenly everything was relevant. Everything was evidence. I felt like I was watching my own live from the outside, but with the sound turned off. She framed each thing carefully, not accusing, just documenting. Patterns. Tone. Perception. The words were calm, but the effect was crushing. I tried to explain context. I tried to remember exact phrasing. It didn't matter. Once something was on the list, it stayed there. What messed with me was how thorough it was. Nothing recent. Nothing obvious. Just a collection of awkward human moments stretched across years, now lined up like proof of a problem. I realized someone had been paying attention in a way I never noticed. Listening. Remembering. Saving. She never mentioned the date. Not directly. But it hung in the room like static. I couldn't tell if this was coincidence or consequence. I couldn't tell if this review would have happened anyway. That uncertainty ate at me more than a clear threat would have. After the meeting, my manager was looped in. Not angry, just concerned. Suddenly my name was attached to risk. I was asked to attend extra trainings, to be more mindful, to adjust my communication style. Things no one had ever asked of me before. Coworkers started acting different. Not cold, just careful. Jokes stopped when I entered rooms. Side comments dried up. I felt like I was being observed from a distance, like I had lost the benefit of the doubt without knowing when it happened. I started replaying every interaction in my head. Every meeting. Every message. Wondering what else might be on some invisible list. The office felt smaller. Walls felt closer. Even harmless chats felt loaded with potential meaning. Another meeting followed. Then another. Always framed as support. Always polite. But the file kept growing. I was told this was random. That these reviews happen all the time. But no one else I knew had gone through anything like this. Especially not with this level of detail. I noticed she avoided me outside of meetings. No casual hellos. No small talk. Just professional distance. It felt deliberate. Like she had switched roles completely and locked the personal version away. One afternoon, I ran into someone from HR I trusted. I didn't ask directly, but I hinted. Their reaction told me enough. They were surprised I was under review. Not shocked, but confused. That confusion felt validating and terrifying at the same time. The stress followed me home. My live outside work shrank. I stopped talking freely. I stopped being myself. I became careful in a way that felt unnatural. Like I was constantly editing a script I didn't remember writing. Nothing explosive ever happened. No firing. No dramatic warning. Just a slow shift. My performance reviews flattened. Growth conversations disappeared. Opportunities passed me by quietly. The review eventually closed, marked as resolved. But resolved didn't mean undone. The file still exists. The notes still sit somewhere. And she still works in HR, still running trainings, still smiling at new hires. Sometimes I see her across the office and wonder how much of me she remembers, and how much of me lives in that checklist. I still work there. I still do my job. But I talk less. I joke less. I keep my head down. The office feels quieter now, not because people stop talking, but because I stopped trusting the silence.
The first sign something was wrong wasn't dramatic. It wasn't alarms or screens going dark. It was an email I knew I had read that morning suddenly being gone by lunch. I remember staring at my inbox, scrolling up and down like I was losing my mind. I told myself I must have imagined it. Work does that to you. Days blur together. But deep down, something felt off in a way I couldn't explain yet. I worked at a logistics company in a tall building downtown, the kind with security gates and badge scanners that beep too loud. My floor was all operations and planning, monitors everywhere showing routes and numbers. Nothing flashy. Just systems stacked on systems. It felt solid, like things didn't just break for no reason. He worked in it. Not the help desk, but higher up. Systems access, permissions, back-end stuff most people never thought about. He fixed things quietly. When he showed up at your desk, it usually meant something serious was wrong. Everyone trusted him because they didn't really understand what he did. We started talking during a system outage. My tools were down, and he was assigned to help. It turned into jokes, then lunch, then a few weeks of hanging out after work. It wasn't intense. Just easy. Until it wasn't. We didn't fight. We just stopped lining up. Different moods. Different priorities. I ended it cleanly. No drama. No threats. He said he was fine with it. For the first month after, nothing happened. Or at least nothing I noticed. Then small things started going wrong in ways that didn't make sense. Calendar invites would vanish. Meetings I knew I had would just not exist anymore. I missed one because it disappeared overnight. My manager asked why I wasn't there. I had no answer that sounded sane. Emails went missing next. Not all of them. Just specific ones. Follow-ups. Approvals. Things that made me look unprepared when I couldn't find them later. I checked trash. Spam. Archives. Nothing. It was like they had never existed. I opened tickets with it. They told me glitches happen. Sync issues. User error. They reset things and closed tickets fast. I believed them because what else was I supposed to think? Accusing someone felt paranoid. Accusing him felt worse. Then my access started changing. Folders I used daily suddenly required permissions. Systems logged me out randomly. Tools timed out in the middle of tasks. Every time I reached out, it was brushed off as maintenance or updates. I started keeping notes. Dates. Times. Patterns. I didn't tell anyone yet. I didn't want to sound unhinged. Coworkers started noticing. They joked about me being cursed. Asked why I always had tech problems. I laughed along, but inside I was spiraling. My work was slipping because I couldn't rely on anything staying put. I felt like I was standing on sand. One afternoon, I opened my calendar and saw entire days wiped clean. Meetings I had read about, planned for, prepared for, gone. I felt sick. I took screenshots. I forwarded what I could. I sent a longer message to it asking for escalation. This time, security got looped in. That changed the tone fast. Security didn't joke. They asked specific questions. What systems? What times? Who had access? When did it start? I answered honestly, still careful not to point fingers. But I could feel the direction shifting. They pulled logs. Real ones. Not surface-level stuff. The waiting was the worst part. Days went by where I was told nothing. My access stayed unstable. I felt exposed, like my entire work life was being edited without my consent. I barely slept. Every notification made my heart race. Then I was called into a room I had never been in before. No windows. Thicker doors. Security and HR present. They didn't ask questions this time. They explained what they found. My account had been accessed repeatedly by someone else. Not randomly. Intentionally. Changes made manually. Emails deleted. Calendar entries removed. Permissions altered. It wasn't a system bug. They didn't say his name out loud at first. They didn't have to. The logs pointed straight to his credentials. Times that lined up with late nights. Changes that only someone with his role could make. Patterns that were too deliberate to ignore. I felt numb. Not surprised, but numb. Like my body had been bracing for this without telling me. I thought about every ticket I had filed. Every time I had doubted myself. Every joke I laughed at to seem normal. He was suspended immediately. Then terminated quietly. No announcement. No explanation to the floor. Just gone. People noticed, but nobody asked questions out loud. The company wanted it buried. Clean. They restored my access. Recovered what they could. Apologized in careful language. Told me this was rare. Told me it wasn't my fault. Told me to reach out if anything else felt off. Then they sent me back to my desk like nothing had happened. But it had. My inbox looked normal again. My calendar stayed put. Systems worked. But I didn't feel better. I felt watched in a different way now. Aware of how fragile everything was. How much control someone had if they knew where to look. People still joked about tech issues, but not around me. My manager became overly supportive, checking in constantly. I nodded and smiled and did my work. Inside, I was still replaying months of quiet interference, wondering how far it could have gone if security hadn't checked the logs. I never confronted him. I never needed to. The truth was already there in timestamps and access records. Cleaner than any argument could be. He never reached out again. His name faded from systems fast. I still work there. Different floor now. Different tools. I double-check everything. I save backups. I trust less. Not just people, but systems too. The scariest part wasn't losing access. It was realizing how invisible control can be when it's done calmly and quietly, hidden behind coincidence and technical language. Nothing about it felt dramatic until it was undeniable.
I didn't think a polite no could turn into a recurring agenda item, but that's what it became. Not all at once. Not loudly. Just slowly enough that by the time I realized what was happening, it was already normal for everyone else. This is one of those things that sounds fake when you summarize it, like office gossip blown out of proportion. But living through it felt heavy and embarrassing and weird in a way that stuck to everything I did at work. I worked at a regional marketing firm in a converted warehouse. Brick walls painted white, long wooden tables, too many plants trying to look casual. My role sat somewhere in the middle. Not high enough to be untouchable, not low enough to disappear. I had one direct report, newer to the company, eager, still learning the politics. My days were mostly meetings, feedback, timelines, and trying to keep everyone aligned without sounding like a robot. She was on a neighboring team. Not reporting to me, not close enough to matter structurally. We had crossed paths in brainstorms and hallway chats. She was outgoing in a way that filled space fast. Jokes that landed just enough to keep people listening. When she asked me out, it caught me off guard but didn't feel threatening. I said no in the cleanest way I could. Respectful. Honest. I said I wasn't interested and wanted to keep things professional. She smiled and said she understood. I believed her. For a few weeks, nothing changed. We still shared meetings. Still exchanged polite nods. I thought that was the end of it. I went back to worrying about deadlines and deliverables and whether my team was burning out. Then she started dating my direct report. I found out the same way you find out most things at work. Through vibes first, confirmation later. They started arriving together. Leaving together. Sitting closer in meetings. It wasn't against policy technically. Just uncomfortable. I reminded myself to stay neutral. Personal lives are personal lives. The first time she referenced me in a meeting, I didn't clock it right away. It was framed like a joke. Something about misaligned expectations. People laughed lightly and moved on. I told myself I was imagining the undertone. That not everything was about me. The second time it was clearer. Still indirect, still wrapped in work language, but unmistakable. She mentioned learning from past attempts at collaboration. She glanced my way for half a second. Long enough. My direct report smiled awkwardly and looked at his laptop. After that, it became a pattern. She found ways to bring up our failed connection in rooms where I couldn't respond without looking defensive. Team syncs. Planning sessions. Retro meetings. She never said it outright. She didn't have to. Everyone could connect the dots. She framed it like a case study. What went wrong? What could have been done differently? What she learned from rejection and growth. I sat there nodding like it was normal. Like my personal boundary hadn't been turned into a shared reference point. I couldn't call it out without making it worse. I couldn't ignore it because it kept happening. I felt trapped between professionalism and humiliation. My direct report started acting different around me. Quieter. Less confident. He stopped bringing ideas to one-on-ones. I realized he was hearing a version of me at home that I couldn't correct at work. Not lies exactly, but interpretations. Stories shaped to center her feelings. It messed with the power dynamic in a way I couldn't articulate to HR without sounding petty. She wasn't harassing me directly. She wasn't breaking rules on paper. She was just narrating my rejection as a lesson over and over in public. Coworkers started referencing it casually. Someone joked about lessons learned from rejection in a stand-up. Another mentioned emotional intelligence in feedback sessions while looking straight at me. It felt like being slowly rebranded without consent. I tried to set boundaries by being colder, less friendly, more formal. That backfired. It fed the narrative that I was distant, closed off, unable to handle interpersonal dynamics. She used that too. In meetings. As examples of growth areas teams should consider. The worst part was how normalized it became. People stopped noticing how weird it was. It was just part of the team culture now. My rejection had become a shared story, edited and retold until it wasn't mine anymore. I considered going to HR, but I hesitated. I couldn't explain it cleanly. I couldn't point to a single moment. It was death by 1,000 comments. I worried I would look oversensitive. I worried it would turn into something bigger and uglier. My direct report eventually asked for a transfer. He didn't say why directly, but it was obvious. The situation was uncomfortable for him too. He left my team quietly. She stayed. Even after he moved on, she didn't stop. The story just shifted. Now it was about growth after failed connections. About boundaries. About communication styles. Always abstract. Always pointed. I started dreading meetings. Not because of the work, but because I didn't know when my personal life would become an example again. I felt exposed in a way I couldn't shut down. Nothing dramatic ever happened. No confrontation. No policy violation. Just months of being discussed like a concept instead of a person. My role didn't change. My title stayed the same. But my comfort disappeared. Eventually, people stopped referencing it. Not because it was resolved, but because something else took its place. A new story. A new target. Offices move on fast. I still work there. I still run meetings. But I am more careful now. Not just with dating, but with visibility. With how easily private moments can become public material if the wrong person decides to tell the story. The weirdest part is how ordinary it all looked from the outside. Just meetings. Just comments. Just professional language. Nothing anyone could clip or quote as wrong. But living inside it felt like being slowly erased and rewritten in real time.
I always thought the worst office moments happened behind closed doors, but this one exploded in the open, under fluorescent lights, with people pretending to work while everything burned. The day it happened started like any other, which somehow made it worse. No warning. No bad feeling. Just coffee, emails, and a quiet confidence that my secrets were still mine. I didn't know I was about to lose control of the story in the most public way possible. I worked at a finance support firm in a low building tucked behind a highway exit. Nothing fancy. Carpet that never looked clean, cubicles with nameplates curling at the edges, the hum of printers always in the background. It was the kind of place where people stayed for years because it was stable and forgettable. I liked that. I liked blending in. He worked a few rows away. Older than me, calm, always stressed but pretending not to be. We started talking during late afternoons when the office thinned out and people stopped pretending to be busy. He told me early on that he was married but separated. Said they were living apart. Said paperwork was slow. Said it was complicated but basically over. He didn't sound excited about it. He sounded tired. That made it feel believable. We kept it quiet. No public lunches. No Slack messages. Nothing that left a trail at work. It felt like we were being careful, not sneaky. That's the lie I told myself. I didn't ask too many questions. I didn't push for proof. I didn't want to know details that might ruin the version of the story that made me feel less awful. For months, it stayed contained. Work during the day. Stolen time after hours. Him staying late. Me staying late. Excuses that lined up just enough. I knew it wasn't ideal, but I believed the separation story. I believed I wasn't hurting anyone. Looking back, there were signs. Calls he wouldn't take. Weekends he disappeared. Moments where his stories didn't quite line up. I ignored them because confronting them meant confronting my own role in it. The day everything collapsed was a Tuesday. I remember because I had worn shoes that pinched and was already annoyed before anything happened. Around mid-morning, there was movement near the front desk. Raised voices, but not yelling. Tense. People standing instead of sitting. Heads popping up over cubicle walls. Then she walked in. I didn't know who she was at first. Just a woman holding a thick stack of paper, face tight, eyes scanning the room like she was looking for something specific. She didn't look lost. She looked focused. Security hovered but didn't stop her. HR was already moving. When she found him, everything slowed down. The office went quiet in that fake way where keyboards keep clicking but nobody is actually working. She placed the papers on a desk. Emails. Printed. Highlighted. Dates circled. Subject lines I recognized from my own inbox at home. HR got involved fast. A room was cleared. Doors closed. But not before enough people saw enough to know what was happening. Whispers spread instantly. Married. Affair. Proof. Office drama everyone pretends to hate but secretly watches. I was called in not long after. No explanation. Just my name in a meeting room. My legs felt weak walking down the hall. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. I knew. I just didn't know how bad it was going to be. She was there. His wife. Sitting across the table with HR beside her. The stack of emails between them. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked controlled. That was worse. She asked me which days I thought he was staying late for work. No yelling. No insults. Just that question, delivered like she already knew the answer and wanted to hear what I would say. I couldn't speak at first. My throat felt closed. HR watched me carefully, not protecting, just observing. Everything I believed unraveled in that moment. The separation wasn't real. They were still living together. The late nights weren't work. They were lies stacked on lies, with me right in the middle of them. The emails told a story I hadn't seen from the outside. Plans. Excuses. Overlaps. Times he said he was with me when he was supposedly at home, and times he said he was working when he was somewhere else entirely. I realized I had been one thread in a much bigger mess. The meeting lasted forever. Timelines. Confirmations. HR asked procedural questions while she asked personal ones. I felt like an object being passed back and forth, my privacy gone, my version irrelevant. Afterward, I was sent back to my desk. No instructions. No comfort. Just told to wait. The office felt hostile now. Not openly, but heavy. People avoided looking at me. Some looked too much. I packed my bag slowly, not knowing if I would be told to leave or stay. He didn't come back to the floor. Security escorted him out later. Quiet. Efficient. Like removing faulty equipment. No scene. No explanation. HR followed up with me the next day. They said I had violated policy by engaging in a relationship that created disruption. They said intent didn't matter. Impact did. I wasn't fired immediately, but my role was under review. My name was attached to a scandal the company didn't want. The wife didn't come back again. She didn't need to. She had already done the damage she came to do. Not just to him, but to me. My name was now part of a story told in hallways and quiet chats. The other woman. The office affair. The example. I stayed for a few weeks after that. It was unbearable. Every meeting felt loaded. Every glance felt judgmental. I couldn't focus. My live outside work fell apart too. I felt stupid. Exposed. Complicit. Eventually, HR decided my position was no longer a good fit. They framed it as mutual. They offered a small severance. $2,000 and a promise of a neutral reference. I took it because I was too tired to fight. On my last day, I walked out past the same front desk where she had stood with those emails. The building looked the same. Boring. Quiet. like nothing dramatic had ever happened there. I still think about that question she asked me. Not because it was cruel, but because it forced me to see how little I actually knew. How easily I trusted a story that made things convenient. How fast private lies can become public records when paper gets involved.